Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, I want to talk about what's next now that the Toronto Maple Leafs season is over. I don't think that the Maple Leafs lost this series because there was no holding the stick call on Radko Gudas on the series-winning overtime goal. I don't even think that they lost this series because on the Morgan Rielly non-goal, the ref didn't blow the whistle, so when they were reviewing it, they just sort of arbitrarily picked when they determined the play to be dead, and when they determined the play to be dead, the puck just happened to not cross the line, even though it was fully over the line at several different points on that play. I don't even think that they lost this series because of bad luck, just hitting the post so many times, which they did. In the playoffs, it's about finding a way to win. And they found so many ways to win in that first series against the Tampa Bay Lightning, despite so many different things working against them, despite being outplayed for large portions of that series. But against the Florida Panthers, they did not find a way to win. What does finding a way to win mean? I think it can mean a lot of different things, right? It certainly means finding a way to score more than 2 goals in their last 7 playoff games, right? Once again, the team that was absolutely loaded up front with offensive talent couldn't find ways to score in the playoffs when it mattered the most. Playoff hockey is not the same as regular season hockey. And no, I'm not just finding that out now. We've known that for a very long time. But if you're comparing the two relative to the number of power play opportunities that we see in the regular season versus the playoffs, the chart that's on the screen is trying to depict that. And the most glaring thing that you're seeing here is that as you get deeper and deeper into the playoffs, and as you get deeper and deeper into a playoff series, no matter it be the first round, the second, the third, or the cup finals, is the power plays just disappear. And by game 5, you can get away with a lot of stuff. And that's not just a cliche. That's what the historical data is telling us. So, in my mind, Mark Stahl elbowing Mitch Marner in the face at the end of regulation there, pretty dumb play on his part, because if he got called for that and the Leafs ended up scoring on the ensuing power play, well, then he'd look really bad. But heading back into that dressing room, knowing that he was able to get away with that, well, why wouldn't the Florida Panthers then be able to get away with holding the defending player's stick on a scoring opportunity? Right? It just doesn't make sense. If they're not calling one, they're definitely not calling the other. And scoring goals is not a new problem for this team in the playoffs anyway. Over the last 3 or 4, even 5 years, my biggest criticism of their trade deadline is that they didn't prioritize scoring enough. Yeah, they brought in Ryan O'Reilly, who is a great two-way player, but aside from him, they made a number of other additions, but their primary contributions were never going to be goal scoring. You could always say that you could prevent one less goal, but when you have a stat as damning as this, I think you just need to go and get a guy that could score 1, 2, maybe even 3 more goals for you over the course of a playoff series. Since 2018, 2019, they played 8 potential series clinching games before this season, 0 for 17 on the power play, and they lost 5 of those 8 games by just 1 goal. So, yeah, you could complain about the goaltending, you can complain about the defense, but when you're 0 for 17 on the power play, I think you need someone who could step up and score some goals. But to give Kyle Dubas some credit here, he didn't go out and acquire that other forward because he thought he had one already in Matthew Knies. And ever since he got into the lineup in the playoffs for the Maple Leafs in Game 2 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, he got more and more comfortable and better as he went. And I'm not saying it's the reason why they lost, because it wasn't, but it was really unfortunate to see him get hurt when he did in that series against the Florida Panthers, because by the end of the playoffs, he was one of the better Maple Leafs forwards in terms of generating scoring opportunities. Just a reminder for the remainder of the video here, I'm not offering up any excuses for these guys, and I'm not necessarily offering up any opinions either. Most of the time when I'm making a video like this, I don't really know what to say anyway. But the whole point in having a channel like this is that you gotta say something, right? So, Austin Matthews was seen in the handshake line looking like he had some sort of tape on his right hand or his wrist or some sort of a brace. And After scoring 12 goals in his final 18 regular season games, 5 goals in 6 games against the Lightning, um, it looked like we were seeing the Auston Matthews of old from the previous season when he scored 60 and won the Rocket Richard Trophy. But all season long, it was said he was dealing with some sort of an injury, and then they finally revealed that it was a hand injury, and we're seeing him here with the handshake line with some sort of brace or tape here. Again, I'm not making any excuses for him on why he had 0 goals in 5 games against the Panthers. He hit a lot of posts. He was tickling the rafters in game 5 with a couple of one-timers, but you got to find a way. Chances are half the guys on every team remaining in the playoffs at this point is dealing with something. But sticking with Auston Matthews here, because Monday was locker cleanout day, and for the most part it was word salad, but I felt like we got a lot of juicy stuff from both Matthews and Dubas, two of the probably most important people in the organization right now, and I think they kind of go hand in hand with each other, and I'll explain why, obviously, as we get deeper into this. But Auston Matthews saying that my intention is to be here. He reiterated that because he said that multiple times. At the end of his contract, at the end of next season, he wants to remain a Toronto Maple Leaf, and on signing an extension, I think that will all get sorted out in due time. Meaning that when he's eligible to sign an extension on July 1st, who knows? It might just get announced that very same day, which is exciting stuff. Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast saying that he thinks that Matthews wants around a 4 or a 5-year deal, and much like his last 5-year contract, it seemingly has nothing to do with him wanting to leave Toronto, but just wanting to maximize the amount of money that he's going to make over his career, because he knows that the salary cap is going to go up, and he wants a proportionate amount of that. Friedman also mentioned that he thinks that once the contract does get done, Matthews will be the highest paid player in the NHL. Right now, that's Connor McDavid. I believe Nathan McKinnon's contract extension kicks in next year, and that's for either 12.6 million or 12.8 million. That probably puts Auston Matthews in the range of anywhere between 13 and 14 million dollars on a 4 or a 5-year deal. And just to contextualize what that hypothetical could look like, because Matthews currently occupies about 14% of the Maple Leafs' total $82.5 million salary cap. And cap friendly, by the time Auston Matthews' contract would even kick in, they're projecting the upper limit to be closer to $87.5 million. So if you're looking at the percentage of $13.5 million, let's say, by that point, it's not really all too much of a difference. Especially when you consider that the following year after that, they're forecasting the cap to go up by another $4.5 million, up to $92 million. The percentage of the cap that he's going to be taking up is just going to continue to go down and down and down. So while another $2 million on top of what he's already making, or even $2.5 million on top of that, seems like a lot, and seems like it's going to be more difficult for the Maple Leafs to build a team around him, in actuality, it's going to be about the same as it is right now relative to the percentage of the cap hit that he's going to be taking up. Which was sort of the whole idea and plan when they had first signed John Tavares, Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander to the current contracts that they're on, that, 3, 4, or 5 years into it, the salary cap would have gone up, 10 or $15 million or so. And even though they overpaid a little bit at the beginning, it would work itself out. But that really wasn't what happened. And I understand that was the same for every other team in the league. But I think if you look at the timing of those contracts, I think it disproportionately affected the Toronto Maple Leafs a little bit more than the other teams. But that's not an excuse. They could have always pivoted. They could have changed their plan. They could have dealt one of those guys and changed their salary cap situation altogether. But they decided to stick with their young, talented star players and hope that they would figure out a way to get it done in the playoffs, and they just didn't. And here's where we get to why I said a little bit earlier on in the video that I believe that Auston Matthews and Kyle Dubas are both connected here. Because Matthews has said on several different occasions, including on Monday, that he has a very good relationship with Kyle Dubas, that he likes the direction that the team is heading. He likes the plan. He likes the process of what they're doing on a daily basis to try to win at least. And the belief that many people have is that the Maple Leafs have a better chance of re-signing Auston Matthews if Kyle Dubas is the general manager. And the day after the Leafs were eliminated from the playoffs, I ran a series of polls on Twitter, and 1,786 people voted, should the Toronto Maple Leafs bring back Kyle Dubas? And 87% of the vote was yes, they should. The same cannot be said, however, for head coach Sheldon Keefe. Over 1,000 votes in this poll, and over 86% vote that he should not be back next season. But I'm not going to talk about that too much in this video because I have a feeling that we're going to have an opportunity to talk about this in the coming days and the next week or so. I'll do an entire video looking at this one topic. And when asked about his situation on Monday, Kyle Dubas was very candid. He was very uh, to the point where he was looking almost like he was going to be in tears when explaining that he's either going to stay with the Toronto Maple Leafs or take a step back from hockey here. That the last year or so has been very taxing on his family, and he wants to sort of talk it over with them before making any decision. But it sounds like the organization has made him some sort of an offer in some way to remain with the team. We don't really know what that is just yet. Brendan Shanahan is supposed to speak later on in the week, so we'll know more, I'm assuming, then. Because if the Maple Leafs are going to get Auston Matthews signed by July 1st, I imagine there's a lot of work to do because there's a lot of other things to take care of as well. Frank Saravalli also reported that the Flames intend to at least ask permission to speak to Brandon Pridham in regards to their GM vacancy. And if you don't know who Brandon Pridham is, he's an assistant general manager for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he's basically their salary cap guy. And there are very few in the game that understand it as good as he does, because he was involved in the initial writing of one of the more recent collective bargaining agreements. He's basically the guy that whenever you see something wacky going on, he's the one sitting in his office crunching all the numbers. So um, he's very important to the Maple Leafs in their day-to-day operations. Among other things, Kyle Dubas was asked if he would consider trading one of the core four, so Auston Matthews, John Tavares, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, and he said that, Florida did trade Huberdeau and Weegar last July, and they got back Matthew Tkachuk. That trade really worked out for them, and he said that I would consider anything with our group that would allow for us a better chance to win the Stanley Cup. I would take nothing off the table at all, and I think everything would have to be considered. And I thought the reaction to that was really funny because it was like, oh, now he's finally considering that. But if you read the quotes from last year's locker cleanout and the year before that, he said the exact same things. If there is a way that we can improve the team and become a better team, we will do that. And here's where I ran another poll on Twitter. They got over 1,000 votes, and I asked, should the Toronto Maple Leafs trade one of Matthews, Marner, or Nylander? And over 54% of people voted that they should trade none of those three players. But the next highest vote, and it really wasn't even close, if they had to trade one of them, it would be Mitch Marner, or at least that's what the poll is saying. And I think that it's interesting that almost 90% of the vote is saying that you trade none or Mitch Marner. So we'll definitely have to do a video in the future looking at if, this has any merit. Should they trade Mitch Marner? Would that be a good idea? What would trade proposals even look like? I'm sure we'll do that in the next week or so, I guess. But I guess that sort of brings us to an outlook. Looking into next year with the salary cap going up by about $1 million or so. Right now, looking at the contracts that the Maple Leafs do have on their books, they have about $15.5 million to spend, but I suspect, orders of operations here, figure out who's going to be the general manager, get Auston Matthews re-signed by July 1st, move Matt Murray. Matt Murray is number 3 on the order of operations list in order for the Maple Leafs to move forward this offseason. And if you're wondering how in the world they would even do that, you wouldn't have to look much further than a trade that they made just last offseason. I tweeted this out a couple of weeks ago, but Toronto was able to trade 2 years of Peter Mrazek at $3.8 million against the cap by moving back from pick 25 to 38. In comparison, Murray has 1 year left at $4.6 million, but had a higher save percentage, 903 compared to 888 for Peter Mrazek the year that he was dealt, and Murray even played more games than what Mrazek did, 26 compared to 20. You know, if you're looking at the real dollars left on the deals, Mrazek was owed just over $8 million over the course of those 2 seasons. Murray's owed $6 million in real money next year, so less of a financial commitment. He had a better year than what Mrazek did. He played more games. I don't see how it would cost the Maple Leafs any more to move Matt Murray than what it did to move Peter Mrazek, and they do have the 28th overall pick right now in this year's draft. And if they were to make a similar type deal to move on from Matt Murray, they'd have over $20 million in space to play with. You know, obviously they would need another goalie. If they re-signed Ilya Samsonov to something similar to what a guy like Spencer Knight got, or Ville Husso, or Vitek Vanacek, or Alexander Georgiev, you know, around $3.5 to $4.5 million on a 3-year deal, I think that's a fair number for that player. And they would still have a decent chunk of change left over to fill out the rest of this roster with some impact players, and that's before, you know, you even get to, they could trade one of these core four guys, and that could only open up more cap space and bring in more players. There's a lot of flexibility here, but it's a conversation for another day, because I could only assume that we're getting towards the end of a video that's already fairly lengthy. Um, So make sure to like the video if you did like it, and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. I know I didn't get to post during the Florida Panthers series. It's not because they were losing or anything like that. I'm tired. I've been working a lot the last 2 or 3 weeks for Sports Center, and that's hockey. And it's not a physical tired. It's like a mentally tired thing. You know, between TSN and the channel here, and just, you know, perusing through the news, I'm like 50, 60 hours deep into hockey every week, and I love it. It's just sometimes, you know, you get other responsibilities and other things going on, and just don't have time. But over the next couple of weeks or so, and the next coming months and into the off season, I'm uh, gonna make time, because this channel still is very important to me. It's not lost on me where we had first started out, where I was just posting videos, just messing around, just talking about the Maple Leafs, because that's what I like to do in my spare time. And then uh, getting into college for journalism, and then graduating there, and getting hired at TSN, working for Sports Center, and slowly making my way over to That's Hockey, and meeting more people in the industry. And so while I am very tired right now, I am very excited, always excited for the future and different opportunities, and uh, the next season. So thank you for following along another season of Maple Leafs coverage, and uh, I'm sure we'll hear more in the next couple of days about Kyle Dubas and Brendan Shanahan, and we'll talk about it then. So I'll see you guys in the next one.